What's up? You're listening to Uncharted on Boss FM Next. I'm here with Saul Good, and it's so great to have you here. He's a fantastic musician, producer, and sound engineer. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Yeah, good to be here, man. Thank you for having me on the show.
For sure. Can you start by defining the kind of music that you create?
That is always a tricky question to answer. I would say I make left field bass music, experimental bass music, freeform bass music, all kind of describe the same thing. And essentially what it is just drum forward music. It's dance music with big emphasis on synthetic sound design and experimental sound design.
Awesome. What kind of sounds do you incorporate into the style you use for production?
Literally everything. I think that is part of what makes it so much fun to make and listen to. I'm a big fan, obviously, as well. It's drum forward music, obviously, because it is dance music. So drums are important, but not just like things that you would find in a kit. I use all sorts of things as percussion. I actually, in the last couple of tracks I've been making, I used I slapped my couch cushion and recorded it onto a field recorder and processed the heck out of it and use that as a kick drum. So outside of drums, just literally anything and everything. I mean, I'm walking around my house or around my neighborhood all day long, just taking field recordings of stuff. And then once I get into my computer and process those down and I'm actually making music, I also use every synth imaginable. Operator, which is Ableton's native synth, Serum, Vital, Pigments, any synth I can get my hands on as well, and create sounds from basically sine waves that way as well.
That's awesome. So do you see yourself, reaching a pinnacle and getting more gigs and performing live more often, basically engaging your audience and expanding your audience?
Yeah, I am always working on engaging and expanding my audience. I have only actually started looking for more gigs fairly recently. I wanted to build up at least a small catalog of original music and have a decent amount of unreleased things as well that I can play out for people that they're not going to be able to hear anywhere else. So I can have a little bit more value to my my brand as a live performer. I created a Facebook group this year, which was kind of a big deal for me because I never really wanted to do that until I felt like I had at least a little bit of a fan base that would be receptive to such a thing. And truth be told, up until this year, I never even had a set booking rate. So all of that are kind of new things. Those are all kind of new things that have happened where in the last 6 months, I've really started to push the fan base building and the brand growth in a more public way a little bit. Started looking for more gigs, started setting up different channels and avenues, platforms to sort of connect with my fans on.
What song or songs are you the most proud of composing, and why?
The last one I made, which I finished up at about 3 a.m. last night. And I feel like pretty much any time you ask me that question, the answer is going to be the same, the last one. I feel like it's pretty integral to artistry to just constantly be pushing yourself. If you're not making stuff that's better than your previous stuff, then what's the point? At least to you, to your own subjective perception. Everyone's going to have their own thoughts and feelings, and art is obviously very subjective. But if you don't feel like you're improving and you're making better art than your older art, then what's the point? So yeah, the one I made last night, I would say so. And why is because of exactly that. I'm just utilizing new techniques, able to do it a little faster. I cranked that one out in about 19 hours, which is pretty good for me. A lot of my songs take around 40 hours, sometimes more than that to make. So was able to utilize a lot of new techniques and a lot of stuff I'm really happy about being able to include in my music. And when all is said and done, arrangement, sound design, mixing, mastering, final product exported, was a little bit quicker than normal as well. So
it sounds to me like you challenge yourself. The next song must be better than the one before it. The next song must be better than the one before it. What processes do you use to make sure that happens?
Always learning. I would say education is the most vital process in the whole thing. If you're asking like, how do I make sure that I am always improving? You got to always be learning. So I'm constantly watching YouTube tutorials from other artists that I like and that I admire. I'm trying to collaborate with other artists as much as possible, learn from people in my area, and just share tips and techniques. And then obviously with the kind of music I make, part of the process in actually creating a song from scratch involves a ton of experimentation. So I'm also learning things every day just by myself, sitting in Ableton, just playing with new buttons or trying things in a different way than I have before. And actually I've stumbled upon a lot of workflow shortcuts and workarounds and sort of interesting things that are just kind of like workflow helpers that I've been able to share with a lot of people, bigger than myself, even just from, as I put it to someone that I was working with last week, I was showing him a couple of workflow tips like keyboard shortcuts and modifier keys that was like blowing his mind. And this guy has been touring for years. He's definitely a lot bigger than I am as far as brand recognition goes. And he was like, how did you find this one? Like, how did you get this one? How did you get this one? And my answer for like almost every single one was basically like, I hit the wrong key at the right time. So yeah, just a lot of like mashing buttons and, playing with parameters and automating things and putting things in series in new and interesting ways.
Well, we all have our zone when like we get in the zone. So that leads me to ask you, when do you feel the most creative? Is it late at night? Is it early in the morning? Is it after lunch? When do you like to create the most?
Honestly, the answer to that question is really when I'm in the best mood. When I'm in a good mood, when I have energy, when I'm happy about other things in my life, that is generally when I feel the most creative. Because, creativity at the end of the day is to me, it's feeling creative is feeling like I have the motivation to experiment and have fun with what I'm doing. I think I am, and I can speak for at least a lot of artists. I don't know about all of them, but at least a lot of artists I know feel the same, that, when you're having fun with your art is when you're going to end up being more creative. When it doesn't feel like a job that you have to, clock into and sit down and just go through the motions. So yeah, I would say any time of day. Different times in the year, it sort of changes a little bit. Just not necessarily dependent on season, but I might go a few months where I'm just, for whatever reason, doing a lot better work at night. I might go a few months where I'm doing a lot better work early in the day if I get started early and I have a nice, cup of coffee or two. So it really just depends. But the one constant is I make better music when I'm feeling good about life in general.
Nice. How do you connect with your fans? What's your strategy for connecting with your fans and expanding your audience?
I would say shows is the most effective and my favorite way of connecting with people. I mean, that's where, as I said before, it's like the music I make is dance music. It's sound system music. It's really meant to be enjoyed in a live setting with people. It's meant to be danced to, and it's meant to be heard on sound systems that most people, frankly, just can't afford and will never own or get to experience outside of a live concert setting. So that being said, I love connecting with fans in that way. That's like the most true, real, organic, whatever you want to call it, way to connect with people when they're hearing your music, how it's, in my eyes, really meant to be enjoyed. Outside of that, like I said, I just recently created like a Facebook group, like a fan page group. And I try and, post memes and post music tips and things in that, and just kind of have it as a space that I can sort of curate and keep it kind of on topic to just music and events and art in general. So I like connecting with people there as well. And, just outside of that, just all social media things, I guess, really wherever I can is the real answer to your question.
Okay, so my follow-up would be, how do you prepare for performing live?
That is a good question. It's always a little bit different. I mean, for the most part, I'm not performing in Ableton Live. I'm essentially just DJing tracks, like a collection of my own and other friends of mine's music. And so I usually, if I have a date coming up, let's say it's on a Friday, I'll usually just plan to crack into it on like Monday or Tuesday, and take a couple hours in a day to just start getting my music together. Like if I have any songs that I've been working on that I really want to just throw a quick master on so I can play them out, I'll do that. If I want to dig around and see what other of my older songs I want to put in there, and if I want to sort of spend an hour or two just kind of digging through the internet and finding out what is brand new and what's hot right now, and maybe hitting up some friends to see if they want to send me any unreleased tracks as well. Once I have all that stuff together, I'll basically just start playing around with the curation of it. Throw everything that sounds good that I in theory would want to play out in a live set of mine that fits with my brand. Throw it all in a playlist. Figure out, depending on the night, depending on the venue, if it's indoor, outdoor, depending on the curation of the lineup, who's playing before me, who's playing after me, and depending on if it's time of day, if it's a daytime set or a nighttime set, and how late in the night, will kind of give me sort of a blueprint on where I'm starting with it and where I want to end with it. So as far as tempo, as far as mood, all that. So I'll kind of take that into consideration, and then I'll just start organizing that playlist into a way that makes sense. Figure out what I want to open with, and then figure out the things that flow best out of that, and kind of take in a pretty organic way from that point on. Things that don't fit, no matter how much I want to play them, I'll move to the bottom of the playlist. If they don't make it in, that's fine. So every playlist ends with basically the 20 or 30 songs that I have lined up ready to go for the hour set, and then I'll have like another 5 or 10 after that in theory could fit in, and that's just to account for the next guy after me showing up late, or something happening. Maybe some of my time gets cut out and I need to cut out some, so I have certain songs that I kind of know are ones that I can move from one song to the next, skip one in the middle if need be. So I have all that planned out beforehand. And honestly, my sets are not a lot of improv goes into it. I really have a pretty good grasp on where my cue points are, what's going to happen when. It's more of a curated experience that I want to play for people. So yeah, that's the gist of it. It normally takes me about a day.
Do you follow, key changes and tempo changes when you're creating a playlist?
Tempo changes, I would say 99% yes, almost 100% yes. I'm very, very cognizant of the tempo constantly. I at least for the last couple of months, I've had sort of a formula where I start at a higher tempo, like around 87 BPM, 174. And then I work my way down to like 130, 65. And that gives me a nice range to be able to cover. I would say that's a pretty definitive range of dance music in general. And it allows me to throw in a lot of music that I want to, and kind of works with my brand as far as starting out a little bit higher energy and getting into a really like deep sort of rhythmic groove, and slowing down throughout. So with that being said, I pay a lot of attention to tempo between songs, and I'm constantly moving and adjusting things as I go in tiny little increments that no one can really notice. As far as key changes, I am aware of them. I don't use the circle of fifths or, mixed in key. I just knowing a little bit about music, I know what generally to avoid doing and what not. And then, like I said, because it's all curated beforehand, sometimes there are things that just tonally don't work going out of one song into the next. And so those I will figure out an in-between or something else. But at the same time, you can get away with a lot more as far as key changes between pieces of music than you can with like abruptly changing tempo. And I think that that's just because with dance music, your body moves to a rhythm. So you don't want to mess that up for people. But as far as key changes, people can normally get down with it unless it's like some horribly dissonant, thing that just comes in abruptly.
Great. How did you learn to compose and more specifically to mix music to your liking?
Just for clarification, do you mean mix like as far as a mix down or mix like DJ live?
Well, I'll just use this example. You have very heavy and really hard-hitting sounds, and your melodies are generally kind of also strong, and they relate very much to the kick and to the bass. Was this something that you taught yourself, or did you learn from someone else?
I mean, I guess I would say I'm self-learned. I'll put it this way: if I was in any other industry, like if I was like an electrician, or I don't know, like a data scientist or a computer programmer, it would be referred to as self-taught. That being said, like no one is truly self-taught. Like you got to get information from somewhere. Like I said before, you definitely can get a lot out of just experimenting with the software, but at the same time, you got to know how to experiment. So I am self-taught, but I spent a lot of my first year just consuming every resource available. I watched YouTube videos like almost on a daily basis for a year straight, just to even get the hang of things inside the software, even know what buttons did what, and how to use them properly. I've paid for one-on-one lessons with people that I look up to, both virtual and in person. And I've paid here and there occasionally for like a month, like once or twice of various paid programs, like masterclass type things. So that's how I learned. I would say that the absolute most groundbreaking educational experiences I've had were the couple of one-on-one lessons I've done with people. I would say that most recently between like January and April of 2020, I did 3 lessons with a guy who goes by 5 a.m. His name is Sam Andrus. He's an amazing sound designer, artist, musician, and graphic designer as well. We did a series of 3 in-person lessons. He lives, an hour or 2 from my place in Baltimore. So we took turns kind of doing the drive, each other lesson. And through that, I was really able to unlock a certain level of experimentation that like I was saying, you got to know how to experiment in the ways they're going to get you good and interesting results. Those lessons really did a number on me as far as just knowing what avenues I have, like what things are actually available to me when you start programming them in the right ways to give yourself those options to experiment with. So, I would say that's pretty much the sum of my education: one-on-one lessons with people and online videos.
Cool. Who are your favorite artists?
Oh man, that's a long list. I would say someone who is pretty much at the top of my list right now in this genre is Killsmith. It's KLL space SMTH. And I'm actually going to be going up to New York to see him next week. Pretty excited about that. He's someone who, as far as the style of music that I enjoy, is really just pushing boundaries so much, and just everything he puts out, it spans such a crazy variety of styles, you know, from drum and bass to down tempo lo-fi stuff to more like halftime future beats, 87 BPM, or like more dubstep-y 140 BPM, 150 BPM trappy stuff. So he really spans the whole gamut, and his experimentation, his sound design is just on point. Someone else that I'll throw out there, because they were the last set that I saw that I really loved, was Sam Andrus, was 5 a.m. I saw him play a set at Yonderville, one of the headlining sets there down in West Virginia, about a month ago. And of the whole weekend, I think he impressed me the most. And I went up and, you know, was saying hey to him after and asking him if it was 100% original and how much of it was unreleased. And he was like, yeah, the whole thing was original. And pretty much all of it was unreleased stuff. And since I've followed him pretty closely for a number of years, we've been friends. And like I said, I've seeked him out for education stuff as well. I have a pretty good grasp on his catalog of music, and hearing the stuff that he played was a big level up. You know, I haven't heard any music from him in about a year. And that was sort of a peek into what he's been working on the last year. So I get such a high off of hearing artists that I know and love, who I haven't heard much music from in a while, and I know they've been working on stuff, and then getting to hear what kind of stuff they've been working on, and just seeing what a huge level up it is for them.
Wow. That's awesome. I love to hear that. Wow. So, do you actually have a background as a musician? Do you play any instruments?
Yes and no. I started taking piano lessons when I was 10. It didn't last very long. Started playing guitar when I was 12, because, you know, when you're 12, for whatever reason, I don't know why, but guitar just seemed like the cooler instrument.
Right.
So yeah, I took lessons for guitar as well. And 12 through 18, pretty much the whole time I was in like middle school and high school, I played in, you know, bands with friends, and would play guitar and bass. And got into college, kind of left it alone, started DJing a little bit, nothing like professional or serious. I just bought, you know, a copy of Serato and a little $300 controller, and would play at like house parties and stuff like that. Never got booked for any gigs or was even pursuing it in that way. And that was pretty much it. That was pretty much the extent of it until I was 25. So that was a few years back now. And I hit this point where I had kind of left music as a hobby and an interest pretty much by the wayside. Like I still always owned a guitar or two, and I still would always just pick it up and play for fun. But I had this point in my life where I really felt like, you know, it was a mistake to let it go, and nothing else was really filling the void inside me, so to speak. So I made a point to pick it back up. But I knew at that point that, you know, with a little more maturity and a little more age and insight into the world, I knew that the only way to do it really seriously was to learn production. So that's when I got a copy of Ableton, and basically dove in head first.
Ableton's been your best friend, hasn't it?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah,
awesome.
Ableton is a blessing. At this point, you know, like years into my working in this software, I took it upon myself to learn a couple other DAWs. For anyone who doesn't know, DAW, DAW, Digital Audio Workstation, is basically just the blanket term for any software that, you know, music production or mixing or mastering is done in. So at this point, I can work in Logic, which is Apple's software, Logic Pro. I can work in FL Studio, which is from a Belgian manufacturer, Image Line. And, you know, they're all right. They get the job done, I guess. But working in those just makes me appreciate Ableton so much more. People ask me, like, why I prefer Ableton. And my answer to them is basically this. It's made by Germans. And Germans have a stereotype about being overly efficient. And literally, if you go into the software, I mean, the thing is, most DAWs are based off of like a digital adaptation of an analog world. What I mean by that is, like, you still have your mixer, you have your instruments, You have to, virtually plug things into different mixer channels. You load on devices which pop up in separate windows as if you're looking at the compressor or the saturator unit as if it was a real hardware unit. Ableton just does away with all the inefficiencies. There's no routing of mixer channels. Everything is good to go. The devices pop up in their chains and are basically like a true software device. So I just have a lot easier time maneuvering everything, automating and parameter changes and things like that.
Well, what's exciting for me is the fact that you use one of the factory synthesizers for so much of your work, which says a lot about the software.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's definitely more. I would say that I use the factory synthesizer combined with several other things. A lot of times still factory things, but for instance, like resampling is a big technique I use. So what I mean by that is, sure, I'll take a sine wave and a saw wave and a square wave and whatever out of the basic factory synth. Maybe do some FMing, some frequency modulation, or draw in some harmonics into it to get a nice harmonically rich source waveform. But I pretty quickly take it out of that and start adding on a lot of other processing, doing some automations with that, and then bouncing it down to audio and throwing it back in Ableton's sampler, which is just basically like a sample tool. You can throw in any sample. I could, take a recording of my dog barking, throw it into sampler, and then play a melody out of his bark. But what I use it for with basses is to take that harmonically rich source waveform that now has a lot of movement, a lot of filtering and EQing, and some stereo widening, distortion, things like that happening, throw it into sampler, and then I basically get to do it all over again. And you can get some really interesting, really gnarly sounds out of it that are just new, that people haven't heard before and that people aren't used to hearing, which is, I think, the big draw of left field bass music in general, sounds that you haven't heard before.
Wow. So you work from home predominantly, right? But have you for
music I work from home.
Yeah, for music. But have you thought about doing some production in like a real studio setting? I mean, you have so much knowledge. I'm sure that you could really help, a production work as at least a co-producer, if not the engineer.
Yeah, I've definitely thought about it. I think that my next couple of years are really just going to be about me growing my own personal brand and having some legs to stand on first in this industry. I feel like, once you get to a certain point, making money kind of becomes more of a necessity. I mean, don't get me wrong, making money is always a necessity, but once you get to a point where you can really stand on your brand and your brand can make you money, then it's just about finding the ways, like how to make your brand make you money. And at that point, I'm always open to studio work. I currently do some mastering for people, and I do a lot of lessons for people as well. Like I teach Ableton lessons as well. So it's something I've thought about, but haven't really taken too seriously into looking for such a thing quite yet.
Interesting. I see you working with very big artists coming soon. You're all into this. Yeah, man. It's awesome. It's really exciting. So last question, how'd you come up with your stage name?
I took a whiteboard that was about 3.5, 4 feet tall and about 2.5 feet wide. And it sat in my studio when I was first starting out. And I just wrote every idea that came to my mind on it for months. My first stage name was Levden, which just objectively is not the most memorable or catchy name, but it was just a combination of parts of my two last names. And I knew that it wasn't like catchy enough or didn't have like a ring to it or whatever. And so I kept looking and I just kept making music. And when something would pop into my head, I just wrote it down on the board. I do that with a lot, like my logo, all my branding was stuff that I designed as well. And I could show you like a notebook page that literally, actually 2 pages from top to bottom, just has scribbles on it, you know, starting with like my signature and then taking like the abstract shape of those letters and sort of like morphing them in different ways, putting them in different orders, you know, making some edges hard lines like angular and some soft lines circular. And it's pretty much how I come up with everything good. I just like, you know, throw stuff at the wall until something sticks.
Nice. Well, thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Thank you for having me. This has been fun. I always appreciate your questions, and yeah, definitely happy to be on here and talk a little bit about music.
Fantastic. This is Uncharted on Boss FM. Peace out.